And my man right here, Adam, had himself a pretty good night last night. Congratulations, my friend.
Thanks, man. Hopefully I'll run it back tonight.
Probably not, but that's why you get those big nights and it takes care of you for a little while, right?
Yeah, but I don't know. It's more fun to just do it every
night. Definitely. No, congratulations, though. That was great. You'd come very close recently. It felt like you were usually when you get on, I won't call it a run because you hadn't hit anything huge over the past week or so, but you had come very, very close. Generally, it just feels like you see things, it all culminates into one big night and you didn't even expect it to happen.
Yeah, generally it's like you see it coming for like a week and then it happens, and then at least for me, I go on like the worst downswing I've ever been on, and it's like it never happened.
Yeah, pretty much.
Generally how it goes.
Pretty much. All right. What do you say we get into it?
Yeah, let's go.
Glad to have you all with us. It's usually for Tuesdays we're talking like a 3 or 5 or 4 gamer, so this is kind of a refreshing change. And I tell you what, did you catch any of the championship game last night?
No, I didn't. I was watching the Kings and the Magic.
I was watching a lot of that Rockets game, man. James Harden. I know he only had 64 DraftKings points, but my God, he's
so good.
It never stops.
Yeah.
It never stops. Like it's just incredible.
The end of the second quarter, I think, was like my favorite part, though. Like he started out really slow, and I think you and me were both like losing our minds at how bad he was doing. And then it was just like, okay, I'm going to start jacking threes in Torrey Craig's face, and he like got the 4-point play, hit another 3 in his face, and then suddenly had like 30 points at the half.
Amazing! It's amazing. By the way, was yesterday your birthday?
No, Saturday.
Oh, that would have been pretty cool.
Yeah,
that would have been pretty sweet. Yeah, the championship game was just. I don't want to say utter garbage. I had the over, so that's cool. But what a crazy! We won't even get into it. It's the biggest loss that I've ever seen. Probably the biggest loss they've taken under Nick Saban. So it was a pretty wild game. But let's just do it. We'll hop right in. 8 games here, starting with Cleveland and Indiana. You have a lot of questionable players, so this kind of makes things a little bit difficult here, right? Miles Turner, Darren Collison, Corey Joseph. You wrote the deep dive today. I know it's difficult on days where a lot of guys are questionable and you really have no direction with no idea what direction it's going to take. It makes it tough. That's why I always try and highlight what would happen if he's in or he's out. But this is one where it's definitely difficult. The Pacers are 10-point road favorites, 207.5 total. How are you seeing this break down? I haven't seen any shoot-around news either.
Yeah, it's kind of flying blind here, and luckily it's the first game of the night. But we do know that Miles Turner and Corey Joseph both missed practice yesterday. It is a road game at a terrible Cleveland team. So I'm going under the assumption that Turner sits because he missed practice and he missed the last game. I'm assuming Joseph sits because he missed practice. And then Collison, I really have no idea. But I would think that at least 2 of those 3 sit. And if that's the case, then Turner, obviously is a big piece. You would get Sabonis starting again, should play around 32 minutes. It's not a great matchup in terms of Tristan Thompson can make life difficult, defensively. It is a very slow-paced Cleveland team. But Sabonis is just such a monster on a permanent basis that I still think he's a little bit underpriced, especially on FanDuel at 7,100. That's a really, really appealing price tag for him. And then you would also have Kyle O'Quinn in the picture, as a near minimum or minimum priced guy who should play around 16 minutes and probably produce something stupid like 2 fantasy points per minute because that's what he does. So he'd be out there as, a value play that you can certainly look to. As far as Joseph and Collison go, if one of them is out, I think that at the very least you see Tyreke Evans pick up more minutes. His price tag has come down enough to where, especially on DraftKings at 3,600, to where, we've even if we accept that Tyreke Evans isn't the same per minute monster that he has been before in his career, he's still, too cheap if he's going to get more minutes because of one of those guys being out. If they're both out, then I think you get more time for Evans. You also get a ton of run for Aaron Holiday at a very cheap price tag where it would be near impossible for him to really disappoint you. It would basically be the Shabazz Napier spot from yesterday.
Pretty much, yeah. I know there were a lot of Napier fades. It's kind of a tough spot to fade when you're getting that type of when you're expected to get that type of run. Now, granted, we didn't know he was in the starting lineup until later, but upon that happening, at first I'm like starting, And then literally a minute later, you kind of had to say, well, no, he's starting. Even if he was coming off the bench, he's still going to be playing most of his, if not all of his minutes with one of Russell or Dinwiddie. So the same is true for starting. And now I can tack on hopefully a few extra minutes. With Indiana, the Kyle O'Quinn thing is interesting because this guy can play, 17 minutes like he did last game and have 30 fantasy points. Now, I don't necessarily feel comfortable with 17 minutes, but if I had to take 17 minutes from someone at this price, it would probably be Kyle O'Quinn.
Right. Like I haven't projected for 16 minutes on FanDuel. I haven't projected for 24 fantasy points. That's probably not enough to get me to use my center spot on FanDuel, but on DraftKings where you can play him at power forward, it becomes a lot more palatable.
Yeah, and he's again 3,500. You're not overpaying for anything there. It makes things pretty easy. I guess the question is when you look at the backcourt and you have Darren Collison and you have Corey Joseph both questionable. It's probably unrealistic to think both of them sit. Joseph took a knee to the thigh on Sunday, so I don't know. Maybe he sits. And then from what I'm seeing and from what I saw, it's kind of weird with Collison because there hasn't been much light shown on it, and he's 5,100. So just to recap here before we move on, because this is a pretty big. This can move a lot of different lineups. If one sits and the other doesn't, what are you doing? Like if Joseph sits, are you interested in Collison heavily? If Collison sits, Joseph's 35, and you already talked about Holiday, but just recap this before we move on because it's a pretty big piece.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat interesting. Like if Joseph sits, then I think Collison certainly becomes more appealing than he would be because you see him lose minutes to Joseph so much. But the thing is, like, if it's still price dependent. You look at his $5,900 price tag on FanDuel, and yeah, he's gonna play. Maybe instead of 28 minutes, you get like 32 or 34. But it's not like Corey Joseph is affecting his usage. He's still playing. Collison is still playing alongside Oladipo. He's still dealing with Domantas Sabonis or Miles Turner as a high usage guy. So it doesn't affect his per minute production. It just affects, potentially a few more minutes for him. Whereas, if both of these guys were out, then you do see a boost, I think, for Victor Oladipo, who, since returning from his injury, really it's been disappointing how low his usage rate has been, sitting around 26.5%. But if you look at him without Collison or Joseph on the floor, I think expecting a sizable bump in his assist percentage is reasonable, and it makes him a really, really strong play, even if you don't give him a monster usage percentage. So if they're both out, I think Oladipo gets a boost. If Collison's out, Joseph's probably cheap enough that you can, go there. Collison just gets tough because he's still expensive enough where he has to actually play well for you to be happy you rostered him.
Right. And if Turner's out, Sabonis is a higher usage guy than Turner, regardless of whether he's in the starting lineup or playing off the bench. So, Joseph being out, like you said, a couple extra minutes for Collison, but that's really it. For me, it would be I would rather roll the dice on Joseph if Collison is out,
right?
Just because he's dirt cheap, and if I can get, because he's already been seeing sizable playing time, but in a case like this, I mean, you'd have to. If Collison sits and he's been seeing 25, 29, 24, 29, really kind of all over the place, mid to low to high 20s. If he's out, I think you got to put Collison or Joseph around 35, 36 minutes.
Right. And Joseph, again, he's not a high per minute producer, but he's just cheap enough where if he's going to play that many minutes, he at the very least is a cash play. If you want to, pivot in tournaments and try and get higher upside, then by all means go for it. But, the minutes would be there if Joseph plays and Collison doesn't.
How about the other side of this game? 10-point home dogs, Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah. Alec Burks.
This was your same exact reaction last time I talked about Cleveland.
Right. Alec Burks, I think, is relatively interesting. It's a good Indiana defense. It's a slow-paced game. If Indiana's missing guys, then obviously you would expect them to be a little bit worse defensively. But the thing for Burks is that with Rodney Hood out, we saw him play 36 minutes last game. I don't really see a reason why he wouldn't here. I don't think Cameron Payne. I mean, I don't know. He could, but I don't think Cameron Payne necessarily affects anything. You have Dellavedova back, but that I don't think should have much, if any, impact on Alec Burks. So, I still think you get 34, 36 minutes from Burks. He's 4,500 on FanDuel, 47 on DraftKings, especially on FanDuel, though. It's just a really appealing price tag if you're going to get close to 36 minutes out of Burks. But beyond that, Tristan Thompson's okay. I expect him to, maybe play around 30 minutes here. The price tag's down a bit, but center, again, there's plenty to like at the position. Larry Nance is less productive when he plays alongside Thompson, which is essentially where all of his minutes are coming now. So even if you get around 32 minutes from Nance, it still just makes him a pretty mediocre play where, if I get some in my lineups, that's fine, but it's just not something that I'm prioritizing when there are plenty of other, power forward plays on this slate. So, Burks, I think, would be the guy that I get the most of from Cleveland.
Yeah. Another thing to consider too is it's a good Pacers defense, number one. They actually have the second best defensive rating in the league, and they play at the sixth lowest pace.
Yep.
So not only are they good defensively, but they slow the game down. So that makes Cleveland a little bit less enticing. Also, Cleveland plays at the second slowest pace. They have the worst defensive rating in the league. So at least there's something there. But with Indiana, am I saying you can't have quality games against them? No, of course not. We saw a bunch of Bulls go off against them the other day, whether it was Dunn with his 16 assists or Markkanen with a strong game. That's hardly what I'm saying, but it doesn't make them more appealing by any stretch.
Yeah, and it's also easier for guys to go off against the Pacers if they don't absolutely suck at basketball.
Yeah, you make a very good point there. Plus, it's just such a certain guys are getting pretty reliable playing time, but the one thing, and I say this so often about all of these guards, you can take Colin Sexton, you can take Alec Burks, even though he's seen a slight increase in assist rate since coming to Cleveland. You can take Jordan Clarkson, you can take a healthy Rodney Hood, and all of them rely on scoring. All of them, have differences, but in terms of fantasy production, very similar players. You're relying on the exact same thing.
Right, and with the exception of Burke, they're just all kind of priced where they should be, I think.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on.
Even Burke. Yeah, and even Burks, it's not holy shit, he's too cheap. It's okay, there's some value there.
Unlike yesterday where we had, I think, no game above a 222 total, you have 6 of 8 games at 228 or above. Wow. That's pretty remarkable. And this game between the Sixers and Wizards is one of them. Sixers 8.5-point home favorites here. We saw that Ben Simmons missed practice the other day. Jimmy Butler, Wilson Chandler were dealing with illnesses, but all of them are expected to play. I don't see any reason that wouldn't be the case. Simmons isn't even on the injury report. Otto Porter on the other side will move to the bench here. And Sixers 8.5-point favorites. Both teams play at a pretty elevated pace, right? Sixers and Wizards both in the top 10. But when you look at the Wizards, defensively, they have not been as bad lately, but this is still not a particularly good basketball team on the defensive end. They have been better, though. I will give them that. They have been better. I still think there are some opportunities here for the Sixers. The question is, with these opportunities, you have to pay. And Embiid is up to $11K on DraftKings. What is he? 11.5 on FanDuel. Ben Simmons has crossed 9K again on DraftKings. And that had a lot to do with Butler being out and him having some solid games. It's tough to get anywhere here with a lot of confidence. Maybe you have a difference of opinion, but it's hard to pay that for him.
I mean, I love Embiid. I just don't know how he disappoints in this spot. I mentioned in the deep dive article, I mentioned in chat today that I think there's a really good chance that Jan Mahinmi plays more minutes than Thomas Bryant, because if Bryant's out there, Embiid's going to you absolutely abuse him. But it's not that I expect Mahinmi to stop Embiid. It's that I think he probably just gets destroyed less than Bryant does. It's just such a good spot for Embiid against a team that doesn't rebound well, still is going to struggle to protect the rim. There's just so much going in his favor, and it's not a slate where you have guys like Anthony Davis or James Harden. His closest competition is Russell Westbrook, and I think they're really neck and neck. The one thing that Westbrook has going in his favor is that I think the point guard position is weaker than the center position on this slate. But other than that, if I can get up to Embiid, I'd absolutely love to.
All right. I mean, it's a really good spot. There's no question. I don't like to I don't like to bring this stuff up most of the time, but I will talk about it because the Sixers or Butler hasn't played since the last time this happened. Um, the whole Jimmy Butler frustrated with how he's being used. Um, Apparently had a disrespectful conversation with Brett Brown. Look, do I think that's going to affect Joel Embiid significantly? Probably not. But Joel Embiid with Butler on the floor has been less effective and certainly less consistent. If Butler was out today, I don't know if I'd have a lineup without Joel Embiid. I still like him, but it does take some shine away from me. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I went through when I did my projections today, and I projected Embiid to play about 30% of his minutes without Butler or Simmons and about 70% alongside them. It got him, going back to when they acquired Butler, it got him to a 32.5% usage rate, almost a 21% rebounding percentage. He does take a hit in productivity alongside Butler, like you said, but I just think it's such a good spot that I'm not that worried about it.
Yeah, and I don't think you should be. I guess I should point out now that I have Westbrook projected for, I think, like 6 more fantasy points than Embiid. No, I'm sorry, 4 or 5 more fantasy points than Embiid, which is why I have a little bit less love than you do. I'm assuming that you have him and Westbrook pretty much neck and neck.
I have Embiid 2 points higher on FanDuel, I think 1 point lower on DraftKings.
Okay. Yeah, and with FanDuel, the no bonuses for double, triple, double, 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 the turnover, uh, the turnovers with somebody like Westbrook are a lot more damaging on FanDuel. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. Aside from that, I mean, hey, Ben Simmons always has the upside. He triple doubled with 5 minutes left in the third quarter last game. He can get the job done. But now you're paying 9,100 for him on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you look at Ben Simmons, he's 9,500. Is there anyone else in a good matchup against Washington for these Sixers that you're looking at?
Yeah, I like Simmons. I think he's underpriced on FanDuel, especially. DraftKings, you don't need to get there as much, although I think he's fine if you do. But on FanDuel, like, you have to roster the 2 point guards. You have some guys priced up a little bit more than they are on DraftKings, and where Russell Westbrook's a little bit less appealing because of the turnovers. Saving some money and going to Simmons, I think, is perfectly reasonable.
Okay. Yeah, I the only thing I don't like about Simmons is I don't think in terms of like routine game by game production that Butler has really hurt him all that much, but I think his ceiling has been capped as a result. We've just seen fewer games where Simmons has really busted out, but maybe that's just bias of watching him, and it's not even true. It probably isn't. Honestly, it probably isn't.
Even if it is true, it probably wouldn't be true if he had played the Wizards every game this season.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point for sure. Let's talk about the other side though. Washington, Thomas Bryant has seen his minutes come down considerably the last 2 games. It's funny, he went from playing 30 to 36 to 39 to 23 to 21. And mind you, the game against Miami was decided by only 6 points. They got lost by they beat Oklahoma City by 18, and he played 21 minutes in that game. You expect Jan Mahimi to get additional run here at center. He has seen against OKC, he saw 25 minutes. You expect that to continue here against Joel Embiid?
Yeah, the Miami game was in part foul trouble. Bryant picked up 2 fouls in his first 2.5 minutes, picked up his 3rd foul in the second quarter, played most of the second half. So that was more foul related than anything. But in that game against Oklahoma City early on, they were just attacking with Steven Adams, whether it was pick and roll or just getting the ball into Adams and letting him just go up against Bryant and just dunk on him. It really, Bryant was overmatched. And even one of the Wizards beat writers had tweeted out that he wouldn't have been surprised if Mahinmi started the second half, and to keep an eye on Bryant's minutes over the next few days, because following Adams, you had Embiid back to back. So, I think it makes a lot of sense just watching how Oklahoma City attacked him and then looking at those rotations. He basically played in the Oklahoma City game. He played his first stint, and then he played a couple minutes before halftime, and he played his stint in the third quarter and then picked up a couple minutes at the very end of the game when it wasn't really that competitive anymore. So I think that Yeah, I mean, Bryant played the last like 2 minutes of the game against Oklahoma City when it wasn't competitive. Mahinmi closed that game for all intents and purposes. So I have Mahinmi projected for more minutes than Bryant just because I think that it's the better defensive matchup. It wouldn't be shocking if Mahinmi starts here, but even if Brooks doesn't change the starting lineup, I think that it is likely that you see Mahinmi play basically, sub in when Embiid comes back and then play most of the first and second half.
Yeah, and remember, Embiid's rotation is a little bit different, than most, because if you look at how Brett Brown is, like, you have to look at Embiid's rotation, not just the last couple of games, but look at his rotation when Butler is in there. And I talked about this when Butler first came over. I expected them to see some staggering, which would make sense. Embiid's usually the first one off the court, so I think you probably see like a 5-minute stint from him. It'll be interesting to see how Scott Brooks counters this.
Right. Yeah. It's either going to be that Bryant starts, he just puts up with Embiid for those 5 minutes. Embiid probably scores 20 fantasy points, and then Embiid goes to the bench, and Mahinmi comes back when Embiid subs back in at like the 3-minute mark of the first quarter. Or they'll start Mahinmi, sub him out when Embiid subs out, and just match Embiid minutes.
Right. And Embiid only takes a pretty short break in the second quarter. So
right.
You could, like, if this plays out as you're expecting, you could see Bryant play like an 8-minute rotation in the first quarter, and then Brooks isn't going to put him in for the 2 minutes that Embiid is out. It's pretty unlikely. He might, but you could see a very short second quarter rotation. That's a little bit worrisome, and not only that, but he's priced at a point where there's just no need to go there anyway. Right. The question is, what are you doing with Jan Mahinmi? If you think that's the case, he's $3,600 on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, Jan Mahinmi is coming in at $3,700.
Right. Very, very little interest on FanDuel because, for one, this is speculating. Maybe this doesn't happen and Mahinmi plays 16 minutes. But on top of that,
if Bryant comes out and shuts Embiid down for the first 7 minutes, very unlikely. But if it happens, right, Jan Mahinmi might not play more than 10 minutes tonight. You never know.
Right. This is just kind of educated guessing on how this matchup's going to go.
And I think it's the right guess.
Yeah, but on FanDuel, obviously, you only have the one center spot, and there's actually plenty of value there if you want to try and guess the right one. So I don't really have much interest in him on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, where there's the two center spots, he's 3,600. We're still waiting to find out what, if any, value we actually have on this slate from Indiana. There's a real chance that if you can get a $3,600 Mahinmi, who I assume is going to be basically unowned because people won't be comfortable with him. He's not the best producer, but he can go out there and give you 25, 26 fantasy points.
Yeah, he can. Yep. And he's very, very cheap. And obviously the Miles Turner news will affect that as well. Okay. Anything else for Washington?
Yeah, Bradley Beal, site dependent for me. Much less interested on FanDuel than I am on DraftKings. He's up to 9,800. Yeah, like it's okay on FanDuel, but I think it's a deep enough position. I don't need to get up there. But at 8,900 on DraftKings, like you should still get around 38 minutes from him. It's a matchup that he should do well in. We've seen ball dominant guards have plenty of success against Philadelphia. So I like Beal. And then Porter, I think, just one of the easiest plays on the entire slate. Somehow dropped to $4,900 on FanDuel. He's 56 on DraftKings. Coming off the bench again today, but without any sort of minutes limit. They said last game they wanted to play him 28 to 30 minutes. He played 24 off the bench. Even if you project him for 28 minutes here, he comes in as a really good play. If you put him at 30, it just makes it even better because he's going to play basically every minute that Bradley Beal doesn't. And then on top of that, he'll play some alongside Beal, obviously. But
all four of them.
Yeah, exactly. But when he's not playing with Beal, he's going to be playing with like Chason Randall, Trevor Ariza, Sam Decker, Jan Mahinmi. It's just going to be guys where Porter's the guy to score, and he's also taking on a bigger role as a facilitator. So this is just a completely different role than we've ever really seen Otto Porter in, because normally his job's just to get out of the way, space the floor, and knock down shots when John Wall gives him the ball. So just a completely different, more productive role for Porter, and the price tag is just way, way too cheap.
Yeah, and people don't like playing guys off the bench, especially when there's been starters, throughout the entirety of the season, and now they're coming off the bench. That shakes people off of them. It turns in the wrong way. And look, if this game blows out, my guess is Otto Porter suffers the most because you get a guy that's the first one coming off the bench. Well, then your last rotation is either not there or it's tiny. But I'm not too worried about that here. The Sixers, as we saw in Phoenix, they just can't. Can it happen? Of course it can happen. They've blown some teams out, but they have a tough time holding on to leads. So
It
not a huge concern to me.
Yeah, and even on top of that, it could really go either way. Like Porter's played 14, 20, and 24 minutes. If they're trying to get him up to Scott Brooks' starter minutes, then they could just run him out there in the blowout anyway, just for conditioning purposes.
Yeah, it's funny that Scott Brooks is actually like the funny thing is if Scott Brooks just says, okay, we'll let him go, you could see Porter get over 30 easily because it's Scott Brooks. So that's something to keep in mind. But he's cheap. 4,900 is way too inexpensive. But I do just want to say Beal at 8,900 on DraftKings. I don't see him as a necessity, but this is a very high upside spot for Beal. And he's coming now off of, 3 of his last 4 games at the price have been pretty underwhelming. I think this is a nice spot to get back on Beal. Jimmy Butler defensively has not been strong, or at least, as a team, ball dominant, shoot first. How many times have we said it? Guards have really put up phenomenal numbers against this Sixers team. Even when the Sixers win, by 10, 15 points, you're seeing these guards go out there and put up big numbers. The only thing now is that ownership looks to be pretty spread out. We have Bradley Beal as the 3rd highest owned player right now on the main slate for DraftKings at only 17%.
Yeah, I mean it's appealing. Like again, I don't think he's like a must play or anything, but there's certainly 50 fantasy point upside for him still.
Right. Yeah, I see higher than 50 in terms of if he gets going here, things could go really well for him. But I didn't know he'd be that. But it's 3rd highest projected owned, but only 17%. So it's not that crazy either way. You want to move on to Miami, Denver?
Yeah.
All right. Miami 2-point favorites at home, 210.5 total. The Denver Nuggets are playing their second of a back-to-back. James Harden stole the soul of Jamal Murray yesterday. Oh my God! Did you see that? Did you see him just dump Murray on his ass and then casually step behind the line and drain a 3 as Murray tried to get up and recover and close out? Oh man!
No, I didn't see it.
It was a thing of beauty. James Harden is just ridiculous, man. But now, yeah, they're playing the second of a back-to-back, on the road. And, as we've seen this year, Nikola Jokic has seen some minutes limited on back-to-backs, but it's been kind of unpredictable because his last back-to-back, he played 37 and 38 minutes. So if we're going off of that, it's not a concern. He's at 9,800 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Jokic is at 10.7. I can already tell you right now that if you're that high on Embiid, Jokic isn't going to be nearly as much of a priority.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing that I dislike about Jokic. It's just that I like Embiid more, and they're close enough in price where I just still have Embiid as the higher play. Where that would be different is if Embiid, but in our final ownership projection, if Embiid's coming in way higher than Jokic, then I would imagine that I end up making that pivot. But without that information right now, and assuming that that's not the case and that ownership spread out, I would rather just find that money for Embiid.
Right. Oh, C-Mail brought up a great point. Murray got up to scramble, and on the closeout, fouled Harden for a 4-point play. Amazing.
Insult to injury.
Yeah, absolutely. Embiid, look, 14% projected ownership on Embiid is not exactly through the roof. I don't like, to me, if you're saying, oh, well, he's projected to be the 9th highest owned player. Well, that doesn't mean that much to me if like the 2nd highest owned player is 18% ownership. Right? Like if it's, he's the 4th highest projected owned player at 38%. It's a lot different than 14 or 15%. Because if you look at right now our projected ownership from the 2nd highest owned projected all the way down to like the 20th, there's a 4 or 5 or 6 point or percentage difference. It's not extreme whatsoever on the slate if these are in fact going to be accurate.
Right, and also it's. And I know it, but it's important to keep in mind, like it's ownership in the context of your lineup too. It's not
exactly
just because one guy's popular and in this case or not that popular. Like that's not the sole decision making point. Like I can or cannot roster this guy. Like there's a lot of other spots that you can take as well.
People trying to make a contrarian lineup where it's like all 8 of their guys are going to be sub 4% owned. Yeah, like you just said, you can play the chalkiest guy on the slate as long as you make some changes elsewhere. By the way. after, wondering throughout the day and yesterday, will Simmons play? What about Butler? Is Chandler probable? Questionable. It's JJ Redick who is now out with a back injury. So Furkan Korkmaz will start. I'll just say right now, Korkmaz, to me, it's hard. It's really hard to like him. I know he had that big game a couple weeks ago when Butler was out and everyone got excited. And I mentioned, I'm going to play some of him, but this is the type of guy that if he's not hitting spot up threes, you're pretty much in trouble. And every other time he's got extended run, he's disappointed or dropped like 18, 19 fantasy points. With playing alongside Butler, Simmons, and Embiid, it's going to be tough for Korkmaz to get much work here. So again, I think he'll have to knock down any opportunities he gets, even in the good matchup.
Yeah, it's probably better for TJ McConnell, right?
You would absolutely think so. McConnell's actually seen some pretty consistent run, but it depends. Look, they've been using Simmons Brown's been using McConnell and Simmons out there a decent amount, where Simmons is at the 4.
Right.
I would put McConnell around 20. I'd have to go back and work it. I'd say like 26, 27 minutes.
That's what I'm thinking. Like I need to go through and redo it as well. But I had him at 22. I had him playing like 4 minutes alongside Simmons, maybe. But now I think I'd feel pretty comfortable in like the 26, 27 minute range.
Yeah, that's where I would have him. Just off the top of my head, thinking
Right.
through the rotation, that would make the most sense. Let's talk Denver and Miami, though. You talked about Jokic and the ownership there. Is there anybody else? And of course, Gary Harris is a game time decision here. Is there anyone for Denver that does stand out to you?
No. If value on Indiana doesn't open up, I'm more inclined to take a chance on Malik Beasley if Gary Harris is out. We saw Beasley play 26 minutes last night. If Harris is out, it makes it even easier for him. And he's been playing well lately. It's just still a tough matchup against a quality Miami defense. So it's nothing I'm super excited about, but it would open up minutes for him. Jamal Murray, if Harris is out, is okay. Millsap's okay. It's nothing from this team or really this game that really excites me.
I think Beasley makes sense, though, especially given that his salary has dropped a lot.
Right.
It is now adjusted for Harris being back. So if Harris is out, this would be a decent spot to play Beasley. Look, not a great matchup, but if you get high 20s in minutes, I don't know, I'd potentially get him up to 30 minutes. I think that would be a ceiling. It's not crazy. Miles Turner is out. We're getting some news here. This is nice, but Joseph and Collison remain game time decisions. So there you have it, Adam. Miles Turner is out.
All right, so at least we can plan on Sabonis and Kyle O'Quinn.
Yep. 17 minutes of O'Quinn. Let's hope we get where we need to go. Nobody can disappear like O'Quinn either, man. You remember with the Knicks, you could have one game where he's got 50 fantasy points. Chalk Kyle O'Quinn might be the worst thing on earth.
He's one of those guys that I swear his performance depends on if he's in my lineups or not.
100%.
Like the 2 nights ago when he was like 10% owned, I had some really good lineups, and I literally just needed Serge Ibaka to beat him by 8 raw points, and I knew it wasn't going to happen. But then if I load up on O'Quinn, I know that it's like 2 fouls in the first 3 minutes, and I won't even blink an eye.
Yeah, I actually had O'Quinn that night quite a bit, but for me, it's not if he's in my lineup or not, it's if he's chalk or not. If I play O'Quinn on a night where no one's considering him, and he really wasn't that popular, would you say 10%? It wasn't crazy ownership. But we've seen 50, 60% O'Quinn nights. I do, and we still have to get through some games here, but I want to finish on this with this Turner injury news. Do you think, though, that the fact that O'Quinn played only 17 minutes last time will still have some people off of him and not? Because I think people will be a little bit concerned about the fact that, he had a good game, but his minute total was so low.
I think they'll play him. I mean, he was 10% owned there, and that was with kind of late news. And then you can just go look. Like what I think actually probably happens is people go, okay, Turner's out again. What happened last game? Oh, Kyle O'Quinn scored 28 points. Mm-hmm. Let's play Kyle O'Quinn.
Right. All right. Miami, anything for the Heat here against Denver?
Not priority wise. Like if I get some Whiteside, if I get some Winslow, I'm cool with it. They have upside, but pretty much everyone on this team for me is priced correctly for a pretty difficult matchup against a slow Denver team.
All right, so now from here on out, every game has a total of 228 or higher. So let's do it. Toronto and Atlanta. We've got the Toronto Raptors, 13.5-point favorites at home against the Hawks, 228.5-point total. Are you prioritizing anyone here with them being monster favorites?
No, because all right, so just going through this team, you have Kyle Lowry, whose price tag did adjust. You have Kyle Lowry, who said in his last game his back was still bothering him. It makes it so, not even that I want to talk about the blowout here, but it just makes it so I have trouble expecting more than like 32 minutes out of Lowry. And I expect that if this game does get out of hand, he's the first one gone. So that combined with the fact that Kawhi's back, and for the season you still have a 16% usage rate for Lowry alongside Kawhi. I'm not really that interested in Lowry. For Kawhi on FanDuel, he's more expensive than Paul George, which is a problem for me. On DraftKings, he's less expensive. I think he's a good cash play at 9,600. But in tournaments, I'd still rather get up to Paul George because I think he has the higher ceiling. We've talked about it before. Leonard's just not that volatile of a guy, especially like when you compare him to other guys at his price point and his skill set. He just doesn't deviate from his projection as much as those guys do, and it makes it less appealing in tournaments, especially assuming that he will come at higher ownership because he's less expensive. So cash on DraftKings, it's cool with me. I don't plan on having a lot of him in tournaments on DraftKings, and I'd rather play Paul George at a lower price tag on FanDuel.
Yep, pretty much. No volatility isn't always a good thing,
Right.
Good
it makes someone a good cash play normally.
Exactly. It's a good cash play. It's like in trading. A stock with no volatility might be a good long-term investment, but you're not going to day trade something that's got no volatility whatsoever, no liquidity. You're just going to let it sit. Maybe you'll Warren Buffett it and let it ride. But that's kind of like Kawhi Leonard from a fantasy standpoint. Is cash game pretty safe play. In tournaments, is it worth it? Kind of no. Especially with the blowout risk here, which it is immense. I mean, this is just one of those games where Atlanta's going to need to do a lot in order to keep this game even remotely competitive, and I just don't see it happening, which is reason that the game as a whole, despite the high total, has me – I'm just not there. And the reason for that too is, look, there are, as I mentioned, Adam, there are 5 other games with a total 228 or higher. So this or higher. I don't think you need to reach here. That's not to say that you can't get to a couple of these guys if you like the price point, but just because it has a nice robust total doesn't mean that it's a great spot for anybody. Are you on Atlanta? Any Dedmon or Collins at 6,900? Are you getting there?
Not really. Just to add one thing to Toronto, I do find the cheap guys a little bit more appealing. Danny Green, even Greg Monroe, especially because Monroe would get blowout run. But those guys at 43 and 3,600 on DraftKings are more appealing to me really than the expensive guys. As far as Atlanta goes, if I'm playing like Kawhi Leonard, then maybe run it back with John Collins or something. But I just don't really see the need to get to him. I don't have a problem with Dedmon, but I don't really see the need to get to him. The one spot on Atlanta that I think is interesting is we have Kevin. I haven't seen news on Kevin Huerter since earlier, so let me know if you've seen something. But last I saw, Kevin Huerter was downgraded from probable to questionable. You have Vince Carter going back into Toronto for the last time in his career. Not to get on the huge narrative like he's going to do well, but if you go and you look at the minutes he's played going back to 2014 when he visits Toronto in games that he plays a lot of minutes. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Vince Carter starts this game and you get 26, 28 minutes out of him at a near minimum price tag. He's still facing the Raptors. He's still 100 years
Carter.
old. Yeah. So it's not it's not Kobe retirement game, but I wouldn't be surprised if Vince Carter starts at a minimum price tag and does okay.
All right. That would be something else. Outside of that, it's tough to get to. Just because I won't repeat myself, but there's more than just the cheap price tag when you talk about the blowout and the difficult matchup and none of it. It's hard to sell myself on any of it. Hey, by the way, little other injury news. Sorry, update is Otto Porter now expected to play 30 minutes off the bench. So if Scott Brooks is saying something like that, you could see even more.
He said it last game and lied to us.
Yeah, he did. I think he's going to turn things around, and I think we're going to get the Porter minutes that we need here. We'll see. Maybe not. Scott Brooks never tells the truth.
Yeah. I mean, what it comes down to is if you told me Otto Porter was playing 22 minutes, I'd probably still play him at 4,900.
Yeah, right. And hearing that he's going to play 30, it got to make bring a little bit more encouragement there. Let's move on. OKC and Minnesota. We've got the Thunder here at home, 8-point favorites against Minnesota. The big story here, though, Tom Thibodeau gets canned after a nice win. And not only has he canned, but Minnesota legend Flip Saunders, who died a few years back, his son is taking over at the helm. Well, it's not just that his son is taking over at the helm, but it's that his son is 32 years old. Now, what's remarkable about this, Adam, isn't just that his son's 32 years old, but there are 42 players, active players in the NBA that are older than him, and 3 active players on this Minnesota roster that are older than their head coach. I don't know, and I could be completely wrong here, but I don't know if this experiment works out.
I don't know. It's working for Sean McVay.
Yeah, it's working for Sean McVay, but Sean McVay is a literal genius.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not saying it won't. It'll be interesting to see it, though. Certainly will.
Yeah. So, I mean, the two
Sean
takeaways
McVay is way beyond his years. Like, if you just listen to him speak, you'd be like, oh, he's 50 without looking at his face.
Yeah. No, he
could be right. I mean, it's a good reference. McVay, it's a good reference. But McVay's, put it this way: if Kyle Saunders has to live up to McVay standards, got a long road ahead of him.
Yeah, no question. So I mean, the two things that we can take away from it right now are that reports out of their practice yesterday were that they focused entirely on offense and that they're looking to play at a faster pace. So if anything changes, it's probably beneficial for DFS. And then also, this is not based on any news I've seen. Correct me if you've seen something, but it would make sense as a 32-year-old not named Tom Thibodeau who has no allegiance to Taj Gibson, that maybe he stopped playing Taj Gibson's corpse over Dario Saric. So those are the two things that I'm taking away from it. I expect them to play faster. I'm not super confidently, but I'm projecting Saric for 22 minutes, Saric for 26 minutes, Gibson for 22. Saric on FanDuel at 3,600 becomes a really good, potential drop play. So
sure.
Those are the two things.
I think I called him Kyle. His name's Ryan, but go ahead.
Yeah. So those are the two things that, as of right now, I think change. And then also, obviously be careful in just projecting Karl-Anthony Towns for 38 minutes and Wiggins for 38 minutes, because we don't know if that'll be the case anymore.
I don't say this to be an asshole, but I really wonder, how do you handle some of these guys that, like, you're a head coach, you have to go in there and handle your business, no question. But it is strange to me, right, that, like Taj Gibson, for example, is older than Ryan Saunders. And does Ryan Saunders, while there's no allegiance, say, you know what, he'll keep getting his minutes? Or is he going to come in and say, you know what, fuck it, we're winning games, and I think this is the best recipe for success? I guess really the only conclusion I have here is that tonight, assuming the game stays close, is going to tell us a lot about how he plans on running this team going forward.
Yeah, no question about that. And again, with just educated guess without anything to really back it up, my guess, though, is that you still see Gibson start, that Saunders doesn't come in and just flip the starting lineup, but that maybe you see the rotation more like it was at the beginning of the year with Tibbs, where Gibson starts and then Saric plays most of the minutes.
Right, and I think that's a very reasonable expectation. That's what I'm expecting too. By the way, Gibson, I think he's like a year older, so it's not like he's a 45-year-old dude that, has some superiority here. I just find it to be a really interesting and fascinating situation where the youngest coach in the NBA will coach his first game today. And, it's a tough matchup against OKC. But where you talk about there being no allegiance, I also have to pose this question, and that is, when you see guys like Karl-Anthony Towns playing 37, 40 minutes per 37, 38 minutes in close games, right? And when you see Wiggins, since Covington and Rose have been out, getting monster minutes, we don't know if this is going to be like, all right, most starters are going to play between 32 and 34, or they're just going to keep getting run into the ground like we've seen with most of the starters when they're healthy.
Right. Yeah, we really have no idea what to expect here. So I think that just targeting guys who are underpriced is the most obvious way to go.
For
Karl
sure.
Anthony Towns clearly has upside at 10-5, but he also has Jokic and Joel Embiid around him, which makes him not a priority. Anthony Wiggins, God, Andrew Wiggins on DraftKings at 6K, I think is too cheap. FanDuel not as appealing the price tag, I don't think. Still fine, but on DraftKings, I think just too cheap, especially with small forward eligibility as well. Assuming he even plays like 36 minutes here, he's the guy that I think I'd prioritize. And then also, Saric, again, 3,900 on DraftKings, 3,600 on FanDuel. Even if he doesn't play 26 or 28 minutes, he can still kind of get you there at that price tag.
Where are you at on Teague? Last 2 games, he's been really solid, 28, 29 minutes. No Rose in the line. No Rose really helps him, right? There's no question. But he's been actually underrated in terms of a facilitator this year. If you look at potential assists per game, just his assist rate, they've all been very, very solid. From points, assist, double standpoint, you're getting good numbers from Teague. Is 65 a bit too much for you
I think
against
it's
OKC?
fine. It's not a priority. Like, I would rather roster $6,000 Wiggins than $6,500 Teague, but I'm not in love with the point guard position, so I imagine that over 150 lineups, I'll still get a decent amount of Teague.
Right. If in tournaments, I would rather roster. No, you know what? I'd still rather have Teague for a couple $100 more, but I'm not prioritizing either of them. And I think Teague will have the easier matchup for sure over Wiggins.
Yeah, that is true.
What do you make of OKC here? Russell Westbrook right now projected to be the highest owned player on DraftKings, 24%. By the way, you hear us referencing these ownership projections. And the lineup builders and Alex Osimo himself, his rankings and projections and everything else we have on the site, our deep dive article that we do each and every day. Well, we talk about you can get the week free using the promo code Deeper Dive, which is one word, when you click join now on the homepage, and make sure to include that Fantasy Cruncher add-on, and then you'll be prompted to enter a promo code when you check out. It's Deeper Dive. But right now we are doing a 50% off the first month if you use the promo code Deeper Dive. Again, one word promo code Deeper Dive, not 2 words. You get 50% off for the first month. So go ahead over, check that out. Deeper Dive, all one word, at awesemo.com. Just click join now on the homepage. Get a 50% off, cut in half on the first month for your membership, so you can check us out over there at awesemo.com. All right, Adam. OKC, Westbrook expected to be pretty popular, but I do think this is a spot where he can light it up. Shooting's been poor, but it's very rare that you find guys that can shoot 3 for 20 and still give you 60 plus fantasy points.
Yeah, really, really good spot for Westbrook. Also, though, a really good spot for Paul George. And I think it's an interesting spot to pay attention to ownership, because the price tag on George is getting to a level where we really haven't seen it and we're not comfortable with it. But the numbers really back it up. Like, he plays essentially the same number of minutes as Westbrook does. He, over the last month, has a slightly higher usage percentage. He's averaged exactly the same DraftKings points per minute. Since Westbrook came back from injury, he's averaged almost the same fantasy points per minute. Westbrook has him edged out by less than 0.1 fantasy points per minute. And no one on this Minnesota team is defending him. Like, Covington's out. They don't have an answer here. So if George is going to be low owned and Westbrook's going to be high owned, I think it's a really, really good tournament pivot, because I think that they have very, very similar upside.
All right. I like it more on FanDuel than DraftKings. Where on DraftKings, he's only $900 cheaper than Westbrook. I'll take Westbrook's upside there, knowing that his ceiling is immense. But I like it on FanDuel for sure. And we've said it all year. He just continues to fly under the radar. And he's having easily, like not even close, the best fantasy season of his career. And it really is not even remotely close. That's how good he's been.
Right. And it's not like we're talking about a guy who wasn't a good fantasy player before.
Exactly. Now he's just really good. Anything else for OKC? Schroeder's questionable, by the way.
Yeah, Schroeder's questionable. If he plays, like, he's really cheap. I don't know really what happened with their rotation last game. I don't have a lot of confidence in him, but if he plays, he is really cheap.
All right. Let's keep it moving here. Phoenix and Sacramento. We've got Phoenix at home. Devin Booker, doubtful to play. We saw him leave the last game with 12 minutes of court time, and that was horrible. I had a decent amount at that price. Oh, no, that was the day before. I'm sorry. That was the 2 days before, when he had 31 fantasy points against the Clippers in a phenomenal spot. Thanks, Booker. Anyway, Josh Jackson, here you have it, Adam. Josh Jackson against Sacramento, Kings team playing their second of a back-to-back. Super fast pace, not a great defensive team. Phoenix plays down in pace, so this is a very, very big pace-up spot for them. 3.5 point spread. Let's talk about the Suns.
Yeah, I think this is where you can get some value, assuming Booker doesn't play, because it's a great matchup against Sacramento in terms of pace, in terms of a defense that isn't great. You have Sacramento on a back-to-back. Granted, they didn't have to play the fourth quarter yesterday, but still without Booker, it just opens the door for so much here. Josh Jackson has looked better lately. He obviously disappointed plenty earlier in the year, but he's been fine lately. Should play north of 30 minutes here at power forward on FanDuel, and then at small forward, power forward on DraftKings. So I think he's a quality value play. On FanDuel, everyone's kind of underpriced. Like TJ Warren's a really easy play. DeAndre Ayton's a really easy play. Both of them, I think, are in great spots. On DraftKings, they're priced better. I like Ayton a little bit more than I like Warren on DraftKings. But you can roll the dice on DraftKings on like $3,900 Kelly Oubre, $4,200 McCall Bridges. There's a lot to get to from Phoenix here, just because you're losing 36 to 38 minutes of Booker, and you're losing the highest usage guy on the team.
Yeah, and it's not close. Like, losing Devin Booker takes so much out of the starting lineup. It's not to the level of Russell Westbrook, of course, but it's very significant. And it doesn't just affect whoever's filling in for him. And that's pretty much what you're saying here with the minutes and then with the usage. What are we doing with our boy DeAnthony Melton, who is 41 on DraftKings and I think 45 on FanDuel? 40. What is he at? What is Melton on?
I think he's 45.
Yeah, 45. What
Yeah,
are we doing with him? Because he's seen some pretty good running. Actually, look, in terms of a ceiling, the guy there isn't much there. But remotely or relatively consistent when Booker had been out, and he's been starting. So do we expect an uptick in minutes here?
I'm not sure about minutes, because we've seen Elliot
Danny Green. I'm sorry. You had mentioned Green. Danny Green just got ruled out, by the way, for rest purposes. So
Fred VanVleet starting, I assume?
Correct. Lowry, VanVleet, Leonard, Siakam, and Ibaka. Just wanted to get that out of the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, so for Melton, I'm not sure he gets more minutes because Elliot Kobo's back, and we've seen Jamal Crawford taking some point guard minutes. But I do think that you see more usage for Melton, and it's enough to make it so in this matchup at this price point and on this particular slate, he's certainly a value option for me.
All right, so prioritizing these Phoenix players, what do we have?
Really, really site dependent. Looking at DraftKings right now, I would say DeAndre Ayton, Melton, Jackson, Oubre, Warren. On FanDuel, I think Warren's really easy to play. Ayton's easier. Jackson's easier. I guess Melton would end up coming in like fourth.
Okay. On the other side of this game, Sacramento, as I mentioned, playing their second of a back-to-back on the road. Not a big trip here, though. What are we doing with Sacramento? Amon Shumpert is out. Marvin Bagley's out. Bogdanovich has come up in price. But, I mean, I just love the fact that he continuously, night after night, is offering so much more than just scoring. He's handling a lot of facilitating work, ball handling duties, rebounding well. You look at his potential assist and rebound chances over the last month. It's like 10 potential assists, 9 rebound chances per game with pretty decent usage. Under 6K again on DraftKings is pretty friendly against Phoenix, man.
Yeah, Kings are kind of the opposite on DraftKings of the Suns, where they're just better priced on DraftKings. You're probably going to get around 34 minutes from Bogdanovich, and like you alluded to, he's playing backup point. So even though he's starting now and his usage goes down a bit alongside De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield, he's still making up for that when he's playing with that second unit. It's a really, really good matchup for him in several different ways. So I think, again, he'll probably be one of the more popular plays on DraftKings. I think he's a very good play. On FanDuel, I think he's fine. Not quite as appealing, but still fine there. I like De'Aaron Fox's price tag on both sites quite a bit. Played well last night, didn't need to play the fourth quarter, but it's a Phoenix team that is just one of the worst defenses in the NBA, and Fox's price tag has come down a bit. So I like him. I like Cauley-Stein. I'd put him behind DeAndre Ayton. But especially on DraftKings, though, the $6,300 price tag is enough of a gap where I think he's a good play. And then Bielitsa at $5,300 on DraftKings. You have no Marvin Bagley tonight. We should see around 30, 32 minutes from Bielitsa without Bagley in there, and he's just really underpriced on DraftKings.
All right. Let's move on if you're good with that.
Yep.
Clippers, Charlotte Hornets. Clippers at home hosting the Hornets. We've got a 230.5 total on this one. Clippers 6.5-point favorites against Kemba's boys. Let's start with the Clippers. What do you have here?
Not a ton that I'm prioritizing. I think both of the wings in Gallinari and Harris are fine. It's not a bad matchup for either of them, and they should play, around 34 to 36 minutes. I think this is a game where you see more Gallinari at center as well, going against Marvin Williams, so that makes him a little bit more appealing. Either of those guys I think are fine. Gortat is more expensive than I would like on DraftKings, but I believe he's still like minimum priced on FanDuel, trying to pull it up now. If he is, he's played 25 minutes 2 games in a row. I have him at 22 minutes
3,600, yeah.
Yeah, so 3,600 is fine if you want to punt the position. I don't love punting the position, but it's okay.
I think Kemba's pretty interesting at 8,800 on DraftKings. I get that you have some decent on-ball defenders with the Clippers, but they have not been the same this year. Kemba, when you talk about volatile production, he is certainly somebody that is incredibly volatile, just based on production in every category. He can fall flat sometimes, and other times you get really excellent performances from him. I don't know what I'm going to end up with, but we haven't projected at 7% ownership in this significant pace up spot. I don't know. I feel like you could get really solid numbers from Kemba here.
Yeah, I agree with you. The Clippers have actually been like the worst team in the league defensively over the last month. It is a fast-paced team.
Bottom 3 against guards too.
Yeah, it's a good spot for Kemba. Lamb being back, I don't think does him any favors as far as usage goes, but it is at least another scorer on the offense that can help open things up for him. So, I think whatever Kemba I get, I'll be perfectly happy with.
Right. Yeah, you're not forcing him in, but like Kemba or Beal in tournaments, if you had to choose one.
Assuming they're similarly owned or it's not a huge gap, then Beal.
All right. Lamb's going to play. Anything else for the Hornets?
If you want to roll the dice on a Biyombo or Hernan Gomez, it's fine. Just keep in mind that I expect this game probably closes with Marvin Williams against Danilo Gallinari.
All right. And let's close it out. Golden State, New York Knicks, hand it over to the Live Before Lock crew. They'll take you up to 7 when we're done here. We got a 232 total, the highest of the day. We continue to climb. Warriors 16.5-point favorites over the Knicks at the Oracle. Adam, floor is yours.
Yeah. Game stacking this one's kind of appealing, but
yeah, and that's about it, honestly.
Right. Yeah, like I like Moutier and Vonleh in tournaments. I think that it's a good spot for Vonleh. I think he actually plays center here a decent amount because Kanter's such a liability in this matchup. And Vonleh's just been so good without Kanter. Moutier's price is down. He still has upside, but neither is a guy that I want to trust in this matchup. And then on the other side, it's, Curry obviously has a ceiling, so does Durant. But, I'd rather play Paul George than Durant. I'd rather play like Ben Simmons or Westbrook than Curry. Not a whole lot.
Honestly.
And Thompson might be my favorite just because he's cheaper and he can be the one that just lights up the Knicks.
These are the type of games we've seen it so many times, like against the Kings, against the Bulls. I don't want to use them all as historical references because all of these teams are different. But, Klay Thompson gets hot early in a game like this and gets fed. And, because you don't really need to – it's a game where you should win with relative ease. Now, if the Warriors let him hang around like we've seen them do to so many other teams at home in the past, then a game stack could be interesting. But just in the way of like, all right, you mentioned Embiid, you really like him. I like Westbrook a lot. I like other guys in that 9K range as well, which makes it tough to get to Curry. Is it to say he can't have a big game? Of course not. I think he's always in play for tournaments. I'd prefer him over Durant. But I do think that Klay Thompson at a sub 7K price point does make some sense here in tournaments. All right. Anything else? Pretty much up against it here. All right. No, you are muted, but that's okay. And still muted, but we're going to get out of here anyway. All right. Hey, thanks as always for hanging out with us, watching the stream. If you enjoy our content, you appreciate the work we do and you want to see more, please hit us with a thumbs up. It does us many favors, helps us out a lot. Subscribe, hit that notification bell. Adam and I will see you back here tomorrow for Wednesday's Deeper Dive. Live Before Lock coming up next, taking you till 7 p.m. Eastern time. Good luck tonight.
Good show, boys.
All right. Good luck, guys.